right, well, good morning, everyone. I'm Ken Phelps with the Daytona Regional Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to our September edition of Eggs and Issues. This is Election 2020, the impact on business. Critical election coming up, and we're glad to have a very strong program for you this morning. A couple of housekeeping items as we get started this morning. Please double check that your microphones are muted and that your cameras are off. We'll be, as we get to points where we're not sharing screen, we want to make sure our presenters are featured as large as possible on screen for you. If you have a question or comment at any point during the meeting or presentation this morning, please submit it using the chat function. And then if you mouse over your screen, you'll see this More button at the far right of your control panel pop up. If you click that, it'll bring a drop-down menu. The first option there is the chat button. Go ahead and click that. It will open the chat function for you, and you'll be ready to participate at that point. You can ask questions, make your comments there. We'll also be doing some of our live polling that we do at Eggs and Issues each month using our Poll Everywhere software. For those of you that have been with us before, you'll be familiar with it. Hopefully you've downloaded the app or you have it there in your web browser, but online in your web browser on your smartphone, go to pollev.com/DRCC. You can put that right in the URL for your web browser, or if you have the app, just open it on your iPhone or Android. Depending on the version you're using, it'll look just slightly different. But when you get to this point on the app, enter DRCC for the username that will get you into our presentation. Once you're in online, you'll enter your name, just introduce yourself. I always include the note at the bottom. Your name will not appear next to your answers. So as we ask these questions, the answers only appear in the aggregate. A couple of options today. We're going to have some multiple choice questions, as well as an open-ended text option question for you. On your phone, you just tap the answer that is most appropriate for your response, or in the case of the text option, enter your short phrase or sentence that would best describe your answer, and then click submit, and then we'll see the answers pop up on screen. When you've got your name entered and you see this screen, it'll tell you stand by, you're ready to go. And when the questions pop up on screen, you'll be able to participate at that point. We hope to get your feedback this morning. I think it'll be very valuable. So with that, now it's my pleasure to introduce our MC for the morning, the 2020 chair of the Daytona Regional Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors from Brown & Brown, Mr. Bob Lloyd.
Thanks, Ken, and thank you for joining us for today's virtual Eggs and Issues program. This year's elections will have a major impact in Washington and Tallahassee, which will determine the outcome of numerous business issues before Congress and the state legislature. For example, we have liability protection for businesses in a COVID-19 environment. Yeah, just when you thought things couldn't get any more interesting, yes, we have a global pandemic and a presidential election. So we're going to have to motor through it, but we've got a great panel, and we need you to remember that it's not just November 3rd. There will be early voting in addition to mail-in ballots. And what about the vote by mail ballots? And what security measures are in place to assure an accurate count? The program will include several audience poll questions to gauge member input. So as Ken just pointed out, make sure that you're paying attention to that, and please participate in the chat function and the polling. And so at this time, I'd like to introduce some very special guests. We have on the line Volusia County Judge Chris Kelly, Heather Post, Volusia County Council, and South Daytona Councilman Brandon Young. If I missed anyone, you can note that in the chat and embarrass me, and that's okay. I'll make sure that you get your recognition, but we appreciate having all of you on board. At this time, I'd also like to recognize our sponsors who make all of this possible. So it's an unusual environment. We're soldiering through it, and I think these issues have been really informative and well put together. Thank you, Ken and Jim and Nancy. But our sponsors, we have these sponsors go above and beyond to help us bring these relevant and meaningful programs to our members and our community. Our presenting sponsor, Halifax Health, for them, representing them today is my friend John Guthrie. So John, you can say a few words.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate it. And as the community's healthcare system, we're pleased to help with Eggs and Issues and the relevant conversations we have here. As usual, I feel the most value I can add at this point is that, you know, we have seen, we're down to 14 patients with COVID in our hospitals. And on top of that, the big question I've been receiving lately is, you know, how many people have had comorbidities who have been in there, and that really is the story. And so what I really want to get across to people is it's really important to protect and really care for that most vulnerable population. And one of the things that we all need to do is make sure we get flu shots, because we don't know what will happen with the flu and COVID together. And that's really what we're thinking about and preparing for. So enjoy this Eggs and Issues, but please, please, please practice all the things that we've been preaching, because Volusia County is in a good spot right now. We talked about it earlier, but we need to maintain that. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, thank you, John. And talking about that twindemic possibility is a very real issue. And so we need to take care of our frontline workers at our hospitals. And so we appreciate you at Halifax Health for sure. Our next sponsor is Daytona Beach News Journal. And I'm going to welcome James Blasco to say a few remarks.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob and Ken and Nancy. We truly appreciate our partnership with the Chamber and an opportunity to address everyone this morning. You know, when we talk about having a pandemic and an election, we're also going through a major merger this year. So Gatehouse and Gannett have come together. We're now the largest media company in the United States. And that means a lot of changes, both for us and for the local businesses in the community that we serve. And I just wanted to touch on kind of three areas that are much different about us now than we were even 6 months ago. The first is we are a huge national brand. We have 260 daily brands throughout 46 states. We serve 170 million online visitors a month. And we currently reach 140 million consumers. That's 1 in 2 adult Americans. So we're kind of a powerhouse media company that has come together. Secondly, our platforms and technology. I know most of you know us as the News Journal and the local newspaper, which we still are, and we're very proud of our journalism and our contact with the community in that way. However, we're one of the largest digital media companies in the country now. That includes strategic partnerships with Google and Facebook, and in many cases, those partnerships are proprietary in many ways in solutions that we can offer. And recently, we've become Google's most awarded partner, not just in revenue within Google, but also in proven campaign results. So we're very proud of that. And lastly, it's really for us about storytelling. Our ability to have new and unique ways to allow businesses, especially right now in difficult times and challenging times, to separate themselves from their competition, provide their key selling points, and really deliver a message that's unique and do it in very unique ways. So we're very proud of what we've become, what we're becoming, and we hope to help all the businesses here locally, not just come back, but come back very strong from this past year. So thanks again, and I look forward to today's conversation.
Thank you, James. And I don't think that we have our next sponsor represented, but I just want to give them a big shout out, and that's Florida Hospital Care Advantage, and welcome them and thank them for their sponsorship of this Zoom into Eggs and Issues. So some rules of engagement for everybody out there in virtual cyberland. We want you to please, again, use the chat room, make sure that you're participating. We've got great content here this morning for you, and very timely subjects. And so the more questions, the better. I will save those till the very end. So we'll let our presenters go in order, and then we'll save the questions for the end. So with that, if there's nothing else, Ken might jump in and say, you forgot to say this or that, but I'm going to turn this over to our Supervisor of Elections, who had a great introduction this primary season. But it's going to be a fantastic program, and we're so pleased to have our Supervisor of Elections, Lisa Lewis.
Thank you very much, Bob. I so appreciate being given the opportunity to speak about voting and elections here in Volusia County, what we do here to make your vote safe and give everybody the opportunity to be able to vote. And that's what our job is here. So I do thank you for that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up PowerPoint. Find it. Let's see. Oh. All right, everybody see it now, I hope? So elections in Volusia County. Give you an idea of what you may see on your ballot coming up here for the general election. Starting with the president, everyone has that, representative of Congress, going all the way down to our cities who are going to have some amendment questions if you happen to live in DeBary, Edgewater, or New Smyrna Beach. They have some city and charter amendment questions. The county has 2 referenda, Volusia Echo and Volusia Forever questions will be on. And then we also have 6 state constitutional amendment questions. So we have a pretty full ballot. It's 17 inches front and back. So I just want to get everybody used to the idea of flipping that ballot over to make sure they vote both sides. And if you are in one of those 3 cities, you will have a second page for those questions. The election is November 3rd. If you don't happen to be registered yet, October 5th is the deadline to register for this election. And the deadline to request a vote by mail ballot is October 24th. The legislation changed that this past year to 10 days before an election is the deadline to request. Of course, we have early voting, and I'm going to show you the sites here coming up, but we are open October 19th through November 1st. It's 14 days, 12 hours a day. We're open 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and those are weekends, Sundays included in that. And of course, our vote by mail ballot mailing, the initial mailing, we mail out September 24th. So that's coming up pretty quick. So it's not too late to request a vote by mail because every day after that, we will be mailing as we receive requests. So 3 ways to vote. Vote by mail. Why stand in line? Presidential elections also see about 3 times as many voters as we had in the primary will come out to vote in the general election for a presidential election. We average 73 to 78% turnout usually. Early voting, you can go to any one of our early voting sites and we will have 7 across the county for this election. So anybody can go to any one. If you happen to be over here in DeLand, you can come to our office at our early voting site, or if somebody from Deltona is over in Daytona or Ormond visiting, shopping, they can go to the sites over there. And of course, on election day, you do have to go to your assigned precinct of record. And that's on your voter information card that was mailed to you. And if you're not sure, you can always check on our website, volusiaelections.org, and it has voter status, and it will give you all the information pertaining to you as a voter, even on whether or not you have a request for a ballot to be mailed to you on file. So a little bit about voting by mail. There's a little bit of confusion about absentee ballots versus a vote by mail ballot. It is the same thing. Florida legislature just changed it in 2016 to be called vote by mail because that's essentially what you are doing. And in Florida, we're a no excuse state. You don't have to have an excuse for voting by mail, or you don't have to be absent. So that's why they changed it to fit more in line with exactly what it is. So as I mentioned before, the 10th day before an election is the deadline to receive a request. And then if you want it mailed to an address other on what you have on file, let's say you may have your son or daughter may be away at school, you want to mail a ballot to them, we just have to have that in writing, just to mail it to another address than what we have. And of course, anybody can come here and pick up a vote by mail ballot and vote it if they want to here, or pick it up and take it home. So postage is paid. We pay the postage. You just drop it in your mailbox. Just to touch a little bit on the post office mailing and what you may have read in the paper or seen on the news. We did have some ballots that were in our distribution center down in Orlando that I was told we're not there, so I want to go pick them up. On election day, we do make arrangements to go pick up ballots. As long as I know they're there, I will go. If there's only 2, we'll go pick up ballots. The post office, I have found, is a little bit slower than what it has been in the past, but we received 68,000 ballots by mail in the primary election, which is a record one for the primary and almost a record for any election that we've had in voting by mail. So it does work. Just mail them early, drop them in. But we also have drop boxes at each of our early voting sites. And this year we're going to, or this election, we're going to have them on the outside where you don't even have to come in. You can kind of pull up. You can hand it to the person that's standing there by the box and let them drop it in, or you can drop it in yourself. Or if you're coming in to vote, you're bringing maybe your spouse's, a daughter, maybe your neighbor's ballot to drop off. We have one inside also, so they can be turned in at any of our early voting sites. We just have to have them in our office by 7 p.m. on election night. They cannot be turned in at the polling locations on election day. There's no way to get them from there back to our office by 7 p.m. So turn them in at early voting or bring them over and come see us. But you can also track your ballot. Again, VolusiaElections.org. Check it, vote by mail status, and you can see when the ballot was actually going to be delivered to you, when we mailed them out, and when it was been received here at our office. And when it says received, everything is fine. It's going to be tabulated and counted. It does not actually say counted until the day after the election, when the system knows that all ballots have been counted by that time. If there is an error, like you maybe have forgot to sign the ballot, or there is a difference in your signature with what we have on file, we mail an affidavit to everyone. In one of those 2 scenarios, you have the opportunity to cure, and it will tell you that when you look at the status of your vote by mail ballot. Our early voting locations in the DeLand area, we have moved offices. We're at 1750 South Woodland Boulevard, so we're a little further south than where we used to be downtown. Deltona area, we moved from the library to the Deltona City Commission chambers. We're at Ormond Beach, we're in the library. Daytona, we're at City Island Library. And this election, we're adding a location at Midtown Cultural Center. They're on George Ingram Boulevard. That's a new site. Port Orange area, we're still calling it a new site, even though we started there in March. Most people do not come out to vote, like I said, until the general election. So it's new to them. And of course, in New Smyrna Beach, we're at the library there. Election day, you do have to vote at your assigned polling location based on where you live. And everyone receives a paper ballot. We vote on paper ballots here in Florida. That's statewide. If you do want to use the accessible voting equipment, it still does print a paper, what we call card or ballot, which prints the voter's choices, and it is fed into the same tabulation unit as a regular ballot is. There is no receipt that you get after you drop it into the tabulator. Here's a list of our acceptable forms of photo and signature ID, which Florida law requires that you present this. If you do not have one of these acceptable forms of ID, you can vote a provisional ballot. And a provisional ballot is you are voting provisionally just until it comes back here to the office. It's verified that you are eligible to vote. You are registered. Your signature matches from the provisional ballot with what we have on file. And the canvassing board approves it and opens them and tabulates them here at the office. Usually when somebody doesn't have the correct form of identification, they vote provisional. There is never, in my years that I've been here, been an issue with that. They've all been counted and tabulated. A little bit about security here in elections. We have a 2-person rule. We have 2 people that go everywhere. And when we say 2 people, they each have a badge. And the badge has a PIN number that goes with it. So if a badge is lost, nobody can still use that to get in anywhere. It does take a PIN number also. So it's kind of a quadruple authentication to get anywhere. But we'd make 2 people into the vaults, 2 people into where the election is programmed, where the ballots are stored. It's always 2 people once we have an election on the books. The equipment is sealed and transported by 2 people. It's recorded. Everything is recorded and documented, verified by 2 people from leaving here to go to the polling locations when it's delivered. We have an employee escort that follows the trucks, marks off that everything was delivered. The seals are all verified by 2 poll workers, by the employee also. And we always have at least 5 poll workers, depending on the election. This year, we're going to have many more to assist with this. And they're all of different parties. So it would take a lot for one whole precinct, as I would say, be in cahoots to make something go wrong or to try and sway or undermine the election process. It's just not going to happen. You don't have all those people that are doing that we have assigned. We assign the peoples to work there too also. 2 people on election night bring everything back to our office. So again, that's 2 people there. And we have many that are working at each of our drop sites to take all of this in from the poll workers. And at the drop sites across the county, they are then brought back. The trucks are locked. We have the key, the employee. We have the employee that follows the truck. They're also escorted by a sheriff's deputy that follows the trucks back here to our office. Before every election, we test every piece of equipment, whether we're going to use it or not, we test them. And then we have a public test. The canvassing board oversees this, and our canvassing board chairman always lets, if there is somebody from the public there, he lets them choose a unit at random. So nobody can say that we have selected a unit. We know it's going to work to do this test. It is a random selection. The canvassing board may select it. The public, if they're there, they can select it. So we test all of those in the public also. After an election, knock on wood, if we don't have a recount, we do perform a manual audit. And that is actually what it's a manual audit where, again, at random, a race is chosen, and then a percentage of the precincts pertaining to that race are chosen, and we hand count all of those ballots pertaining to that race. And we verify, the canvassing board actually oversees this. No one in the room knows the results, and they present it to the canvassing board, what they hand counted. The canvassing board does confirm that is what actually went through on election night when all the results were uploaded. And we have not had one that has been wrong yet. They have all been 100% accurate. So the machines work and the people counting work. So results from the precinct, they all come into a secure server that is not connected to anything on the outside world. There is no internet connection to it. The only thing that's plugged into the wall is actually the power. So it has no connection anywhere. It looks for the encrypted keys from each of the machines when they are uploaded. If it does not match, it will not take it. And we can bring those back, and then we will actually upload those results from here in the office. And the results that everyone sees out on the website election night, we take a clean, sterile USB drive, put it into this server, extract the results out, and then we push those out to the web. And then as we do an update, as more precincts come in, we put another clean, sterile USB drive in there and extract those results. So there's never something that goes from one machine to another to corrupt that server. Cybersecurity, we are monitored by several different third-party organizations or businesses that we have contracted with based on the Homeland Security. Also, our county IT department is very instrumental in keeping our elections safe. They are monitoring that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I have great confidence in our county IT department. A little bit about the preferred method of voting. You can see the changes over the years. The top of the screen are 2018. How in the primary, the turnout going to a general, and then in presidential election years from 2016, and I added the primary of 2020, and you can see how vote by mail grew based on this pandemic. We had 67%. That is really high for a primary election. It's growing, and most of the people vote. if you look over the years, most people vote before Election Day. They're either early voting or voting by mail. So Election Day is not as busy as it used to be, although it is still, and it will be for the general election, because we do have probably about 3 times more people will come out to vote for this. Speaking of voting, the importance of one vote, you can see over the years how close some of our races are, most of them in municipals, because, you know, the smaller amount of people, the closer that those races will be in the tighter. But Lake Helen in 2015 was a 1 vote difference. 2003, Daytona Beach Zone was 1 vote. Ponce Inlet in 2003 was 1 vote. And in 2001, the Deltona City Commission seat ended in a tie. And so by the flip of a coin, that tie was broken, and that's how that candidate won that seat. So every vote is important. You may think, some people may think a vote isn't. It does. It's very important, especially to these people who are running, how important every vote is. So we just ask you to be informed, be involved, be election ready, because voting is your voice. That's how you can have your views, you know, checking out the candidates and knowing they think like you along your same lines, just studying all the issues. Just be informed. And here's our website, VolusiaElections.org. There's a lot of information out there into each of the elections and different voting, all the results you can find out there, candidate information. Most of our cities' candidates are all on there. They file their reports with us. How to register, you know, it's a lot of information, and I hope that everyone will utilize it. And I thank you for the opportunity for letting me tell everybody about our department.
Well, Lisa, it's been a pleasure having you on, and I don't think we can say enough how much we appreciate you and the job that you and your team do for our elections in Volusia County. I was around in 2000, and it was an interesting election in 2000. And our supervisor of elections, Deanie Lowe, she went through the ringer, as did some others. In 2002, I happened to be at a reception, and Secretary James Baker was there, who was very involved in the post-election process. And he had a joke. He said that we have 63 counties in Florida and 4 recounties. And, you know, everybody got a good laugh about that. But it's if we can go through 2000 and come out through that process without any trouble in the streets or gunfire or the military involved, I know we can do it in this election. But anyway, I really appreciate your commentary, and we're fortunate to have you. So I'm going to next introduce some out-of-town guests who are joining us from the Florida Chamber. We have Nick Catroppo, who is the Vice President of Political Operations at the Florida Chamber, where he manages the strategic political plan and leads the political operations team. He was previously Chief of Staff, Office of Congressional and Intergovernmental Affairs at the U.S. Department of Energy, where he oversaw matters pertaining to Congress, local, and state elected officials. He was campaign manager for my good friend, Attorney General Ashley Moody. He's worked for 2 members of Congress from Florida, in addition to working on several congressional races and state legislative campaigns. He earned a bachelor's in political science from the University of South Florida, and now resides in Tallahassee with his wife, Amanda. So assisting Nick today is Andrew Wiggins, as Senior Director of Campaigns and Elections for the Florida Chamber. He manages their political campaign activity throughout the state. He previously was the Deputy Director of Senate Campaigns at the Florida Republican Party. He has more than 13 years of experience helping elect candidates to the House and Senate across Florida. He earned his bachelor's and master's from the University of Florida. Go Gators. All right. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick and Andrew. We really appreciate you guys dropping in from Tallahassee and joining our program. So Nick, take it away.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate that. If you give me just one moment, let me tee up the presentation here. And Bob, can you all see that on your screen there?
Yes.
Is that great? Well, again, Bob, thank you for having us this morning. Andrew is going to join us here shortly by phone. He's actually speaking to the Southlake Chamber of Commerce right now. So we're trying to dividing things up, but again, glad to be with you all this morning to discuss an incredibly important election. Lisa did a fantastic job. You guys have a fantastic supervisor of elections, and be blessed that you all have that. There are parts of the state where things don't run as smoothly, and it's great to have confidence in your supervisor of elections when on election night you're seeing results in a timely fashion, and you're confident that those numbers that are going up are correct. So great presentation. Thank you. Let me start off here with, sorry, let me try to minimize this so I can see my screen better. There we go. So primary election voter turnout, and I know that was just covered on a county-wide basis, but I'm going to cover it here more from a statewide perspective. Primary election voter turnout in this election. As you'll see on the left-hand side, we split this into 2020. So for perspective for folks, 2020 on the left, 2016 on the right, and then I'm going to talk about some of the highlights that we saw this year. So 2020 primary election, vote by mail. As your supervisor election said, I believe you guys were at about 68% in Volusia County. Statewide, we were about 60% in vote by mail turnout, and that's for a multitude of reasons. Of course, COVID being at the top of the list. In terms of folks not wanting to show up at a voting site and feeling more confident and being able to vote by mail. But then, of course, the president has shared his views on vote by mail voting, and I appreciate the point on absentee and vote by mail and defining those. That was done earlier in the presentation. In Florida, you're correct, they are the same. The legislature changed absentee voting to vote by mail voting just a few years ago, and we have no excuse state, so anyone that would like a mail ballot can go ahead and vote by mail, which is different than quite a few other states that are out there. So you've heard the president speak to that. He did tweet recently that he has confidence in the Florida system. But the reason I point to that is you'll notice the discrepancy here in terms of vote by mail turnout between Republicans and Democrats from 2020 to 2016. So in 2020, you'll see 50% Democrats, 35% Republicans, 15% MPA voted by mail, compared to 2016, which was almost flipped, where you had 38% Democrat, 49% Republican, and then 13% MPA. You had a lot more Republicans, a little more fearful of the vote by mail process here in the state, based what I would believe on some of the president's tweets and some of his thoughts on vote by mail voting. You'll then go down to early in person. Our early in person we were pretty consistent there with 2016 at 14, 18% in that margin. And then election day is where you saw the biggest fall off based on the jump in vote by mail voting. 25% turnout on election day, with a 28% overall turnout, 3.8 million voters compared to 2.9. Now, of course, population has risen in those years, but percentage-wise, turnout was a little bit higher than the 2016 primary. The highlights. So with that, 28.1% turnout is the highest for a statewide primary since 2002 and the highest in a non-gubernatorial since 92. 3/4, 75% of ballots were cast prior to election day, which is a double-digit increase on prior years. And then most importantly here, for the first time ever in Florida, a majority of ballots, 60% of ballots, were cast by mail. Moving on to the Florida Chamber and its role in Florida politics. We are a nonpartisan organization. We endorse across the aisle. We get involved with the races across the aisle. And at the end of the day, it's endorsing candidates and supporting candidates that overall have a pro-business, pro-jobs agenda that they're supporting, whether they're an incumbent or they're first time running for office. So let me break those two down. Here. So incumbents, if you're an incumbent in the state legislature, you are scored on a legislative report card that's available on our website. After every session, Florida Chamber rolls out a legislative report card, grading legislators anywhere from an A to an F rating. And that's broken down by our 6 pillars. So everywhere from infrastructure to education, tort reform across the board, legislators are graded based on their performance in the legislature and the votes that they took. And we are very open about that process. It's not a behind closed doors process. We actually send a letter to every legislator prior to voting. So we'll take a step back here. We roll out our agenda before legislative session happens, but then before a vote actually happens, whether it's in committee or on the floor, we send a letter to the legislator saying our stance on it, and that yes, whether they will be graded on that vote in our legislative report card. So at the end of the day, they won't come back to us and say, I didn't know that this was an important vote for the business community. And we can say, well, actually, we send you, a letter in committee and then a letter before it went to the House or Senate floor to let you know our position on it. So then we roll out those grades at the end of session, and legislators, incumbents, are endorsed based on their performance on the legislative report card. For new candidates, so candidates that are running for whether it's an open seat, whether they're running against an incumbent, but new candidates fill out a questionnaire. And it's a pretty lengthy questionnaire. And again, it covers our 6 pillars. And those are available on our website. For sake of time, I won't run through all of those, but it covers our 6 pillars. And in addition to that, it asks questions to get to know the candidates a little bit better. Just, who do they go to in their community for advice? If they're running in Volusia County, do they go to Bob? Who do they go to? Do they go to Jim? Who are they going to for advice when running for office, and who do they lean on? And then in addition to filling out the questionnaire, we also interview candidates. So first-time candidates they'll fill out their questionnaire, we'll schedule a time to interview them. And our interview is done by our Florida Chamber Political Institute, which some of you may be very familiar with it and may be a part of it. But FCPI is a dues-paying organization. It's part of the Florida Chamber, but it allows, it gives you a lot of access on the political side, but what it also provides is the ability to interview these candidates. So for this year, we interviewed over 80 candidates that were running for office. And that leads me to this slide here. We had a fantastic night for the business community on the primary election. We won 21 of 23 elections that we endorsed in, so 91% success rate. And I just want to, this is the list of all candidates that we endorse. This is all 23 of them. But I'm just going to touch on, you'll notice that 4 of them are in bold. And these are the ones that I want to focus on, just not because one's more important than the other, but simply just to share. I think this kind of draws across the board the different dynamics in each race. So starting with Senate District 27, Ray Rodriguez. Ray Rodriguez won with 75% of the vote. This was kind of the marquee Senate race. This was down in Southwest Florida, this race. Ray Rodriguez, a state house member, was running against Heather Fitzenhagen, another state house member. And this was a very drastic difference in candidates for the Florida Chamber and really for business community as a whole. Ray Rodriguez, in his lifetime of being in the Florida House, had an A rating, a lifetime A rating with the Florida Chamber. Speaking of that legislative report card that I was just talking about, on that legislative report card had an A rating lifetime, compared to his opponent, Heather Fitzenhagen, who had a C rating, which was, in terms of Republican legislators, again, reminder, this was a Republican primary, in terms of Republican legislators, was the lowest rating in the legislature for a candidate. So Ray ended up winning with 75% of the vote. Again, a huge success story for a multitude of folks, and Wilton Simpson being at the top of that list. Was a strong early supporter in terms of leadership dynamic moving into the next election cycle and who's going to be Senate president come next year. The second race to talk about here is House District 2, Alex Andrade. That was a race that I wanted to point to because that turned out to be, much like Senate District 27, it turned out to be a very nasty, negative primary race, and this was up in the Panhandle. It was a Pensacola area seat, so many of you may not be familiar with it, but this was a primary election. Alex Andrade, an incumbent legislator, was running against Chris Dossev. Chris had run against Matt Gaetz in a congressional primary a few years back and was now running again, and again turned into an expensive and negative primary race that I know the Republican side did not want to have to face. there in that House district. House District 43, this is a race, it was a Democratic primary in Osceola, Kissimmee area. Kristen Arrington, who we had endorsed, won with 31% of the vote. And I know that's kind of a shocking number that you can win an election with only 31%, but this was a large primary. And it was also an open primary that, what I mean by that is no Republican, no write-in candidate, no NPA filed to run for this seat. So this was a Democratic primary, but everyone who showed up to vote that day had an ability to vote in that primary. And then finally, due to the implications that this race had, House District 116, the implications this race had for leadership, House leadership, Danny Perez, this is a Miami-Dade seat, was involved in a inter-party fight. And came out successfully with almost 60% of the vote. And again, he's going to be, has the vote cards to become speaker after. So this upcoming legislative session for the next 2 years will be Speaker Chris Sprowls as of right now, followed by Speaker Paul Renner, and then followed by, it would be Speaker designate Danny Perez. So Danny was successful in his primary. You don't typically see a primary election against somebody who's slated to be in leadership. And this turned out, I shouldn't say just a primary, but a well-funded primary challenge. And again, what happened ended up being a very negative race. So turning to November, I'm going to touch on some key House races, and then I'm going to touch on key Senate races on the next slide. So key House races that you'll have here, and just going through them here, starting with the rematches. So 2 rematches that you're going to see from incumbent legislators, Reps Federhoff and Caruso. They're facing the same opponent that they faced in the 2018 general election, and they won those races by fewer than 100 votes. Caruso won by 30-something votes, so a very tight margin, and those candidates are running again in a rematch in what is a presidential year. So turnout is, of course, going to look different than it did in a midterm year, which we saw in 2018. Incumbents are facing challenges this year. Rep Clemens, which is that Dixie County, North Central Florida base seat, is facing a very tough challenge from a Democrat, Kaiser Enneking. Some of you maybe remember Kaiser from her time running in 2018 against Keith Perry, Senator Keith Perry. He won that race, but again, by about 1 percentage point in a very tight race. She's a very competitive candidate, is able to raise a lot of money, and has grassroots support in that race. So we expect that race to be very tight. But that is a race where there's a stark difference in candidates. Kaiser Enneking did not fill out a questionnaire or even interview with the Florida Chamber. Representative Clemens is one of the business community's biggest champions in the Florida legislature. So we have endorsed Representative Clemens and hope to see him return in the next legislative session. In Seminole County, so just near over by you all, due to the fast-changing politics of the county in the past few years, and just the past 4 years, you've seen Republican margins drastically narrow down based on an increase in Democratic registration. Being a suburb of Orlando, we're seeing that in a lot of the suburban areas across the state, that Democratic voter registration is increasing. And then you're seeing in some of the rural areas here in Florida, Republican registration increasing. So you'll see here in Seminole County, 2 representatives, Smith and Plakin, 2 incumbents that, again, the Florida Chamber has endorsed both of them due to their performance in the legislature so far, are going to face close contests in 2020, just based on the changing politics in Seminole County. Freshman Democrats is another key area to focus on in these House races. Republicans lost 7 seats in the 2018 cycle, and they're looking to, of course, reclaim those seats this cycle. So they're spending heavily. You'll see quite a bit of articles written about the fundraising gaps or fundraising advantages that one party has over another. That's critical going into this time, because as your supervisor election was just mentioning, that the majority of the vote is going to actually take place in a vote by mail setting. So just like we saw in the primary, vote by mail ballots, they can go out as soon as September, in about 10 days, September 18th, 19th, to voters that are, to what is called UOCAV, voters that are residing overseas, so military, civilians overseas. And then a few weeks following that, you'll see domestic ballots going out in the mail. So with 60% of ballots being cast vote by mail in the primary election, we can expect to see similar numbers going into the general election, which means that a lot of folks say, well, election day is in November. Well, for a lot of folks, election day is in October. So having the money advantage, being able to spend that money for a campaign, whether you're spending on TV, mail, digital, we're in a unique time right now with COVID. So knocking on doors is a little more difficult to do in some areas of the state. But from a ground game, so across the board, how they're spending their resources is that timeline has been moved up compared to recent years where you were waiting and holding your money back a little bit to spend that because you weren't expecting voters to vote until election day. And then I'll finally touch on Miami races. The presidential contest will play a role across the state, but it especially plays a key role in Miami-Dade. So there are some state legislative seats down there that we're keeping a close eye on. A lot of those are pretty safe for the incumbents that are in them currently, but some are going to see some tightly contested races. Moving over to the Senate, and this is one that you guys, I'm sure, are very familiar with. In Senate District 9, Jason Broder versus Patricia Sigmund. This is predominantly Seminole County, but touches into Volusia County as well. This is a seat that Senator David Simmons is term limited and currently represents. He's represented the seat in a very safe manner, that he hasn't had a highly contested race. But back to the key point I was making earlier about the changing political dynamic of Seminole County, you'll see this race be incredibly competitive this year, with a lot of money already being spent in Democrats trying to win this seat. But this is a race that has a large difference in the two candidates and based on their political and just their ideological philosophy. Jason Broder is the president, CEO of the Seminole County Chamber, had an A rating again during his time in the Florida legislature as a House member. And Patricia Sigmund is a candidate who is a lawyer, but has spent a majority of her time doing employment law and suing businesses. So the Florida Chamber has endorsed Jason Broder, and we hope that he'll be successful in that race. The Danny Burgess race versus Kathy Lewis, put on here, not necessarily because we think that it's going to be incredibly competitive. It'll be somewhat competitive. Because Kathy Lewis is a candidate who ran against Senator Tom Lee back in 2018. So from a name ID perspective and being involved in the community, folks have already seen her name on the ballot. But Danny Burgess was in the State House, left the State House to be the executive director, Florida Department of Veterans Affairs under Governor DeSantis, and has since resigned from that post to run for the Senate seat in the wake of the resignation of Senator Tom Lee. It's a district that leans Republican, so it's expected that Danny Burgess wins. But pointing it out because it's considered a special election this year, although the election dates line up with the general election, it's coined a special election because of the resignation of Tom Lee and that happening later on over the summertime. So they had to make it a special election. Then finally, Senate District 39, again, another marquee type Senate race down in the Miami-Dade area. This is a seat that a Republican was the incumbent in, Senator Anatier Flores, but a seat that from a Republican-Democrat perspective, Hillary Clinton won this seat by double digits on the presidential ticket back in 2016, but Anatier Flores, on the flip side, won it by double digits, running in a state Senate seat. So this is a seat that folks will vote at the top of the ticket one way, but may, as they go down their ballot, vote a different way. So this is another seat, though, that, again, a large difference in candidates. Ana Maria Rodriguez and Javier Fernandez. They're both current state House members. One with an A rating, Ana Maria Rodriguez, on our legislative report card. And then Javier Fernandez has a failing grade on the legislative report card. So that is a race. Back to when I talked about the key elements of a chamber endorsement, a Florida chamber endorsement, this is a race that we endorsed in as well. So constitutional amendments, and give me a second here. I want to see, I believe, and let me check. I think we have Andrew Wiggins. I believe he joined the line here. Andrew, if you're there, Andrew, and Bob, thank you for the introduction of both of us, but I want to touch on a few things that, and I hope Andrew's on the line and I'm just saying these things, but it sounds like he's there. But Andrew works on our political team as well. But in addition to working on our political team, he is our liaison with local chambers. And that's why he's joining us now. He was speaking to the South Lake Chamber prior to this, but works with our local chambers in a multitude of ways, not just from a political standpoint, but when it came to we had some PPE work that we were doing with local chambers. He was spearheading that effort through COVID. And then in addition to that, he's also spearheading our efforts on constitutional amendments this cycle. So if I can, I want to turn it over to Andrew to touch briefly on these. He's joining us via phone, so I'm going to tell him, Andrew, right now the screen is showing amendments 1 through 3, and then our next slide is amendments 4 through 6. So if you want to start with amendments 1 through 3, go ahead.
Thanks, Nick. I hope everyone can hear me. Just want to take a quick opportunity to talk about these amendments and just sort of how important they are this election cycle. What we've seen in Florida is many groups have hijacked our constitutional amendmentary process to change policy that they can't affect during legislative session because they find the legislature unwilling to do so. So we find a lot of outside groups that have turned our amendmentary process into a way to have policy changes that they can't pass through our through the process that's set up by the Constitution. So, kind of want to start by talking about Amendment 1, which is the citizenship requirement to vote in Florida elections. This is a measure to, the groups that are pushing it are wanting to strengthen the laws right now, so that you have to be an American citizen to vote in Florida. Problem is, it's already in our Constitution. So right now, the Constitution says every citizen shall vote. This will change to the word only a citizen can vote. So really, when you look at the bottom line, it doesn't change a lot. But what the groups do, what the group believes, it will strengthen our Constitution in the future, just to make it tougher, for citizenship requirements. I think they're worried of maybe a progressive court in the future weakening citizenship, but quite frankly, if you look at what it does, it does very little. This is one we've taken no position on. It's being sponsored by Florida citizen voters. It's really being sponsored by a national group that's gone through several states already, putting this requirement in the Constitution, and it's just looking to strengthen those laws. Secondarily, let's move to Amendment 2. It's raising minimum wage. What it would do is it would hike the minimum wage to $10 an hour next September 30th. Then it would adjust it by $1 per year up until 2026 when it hits $15 an hour. Then at that point, it would adjust to inflation moving forward. So it may start at 15, but based upon the CPI index, it would move up year thereafter. It affects wages. It even increases the tip wage. So it's a measure that is extremely concerning to us and many others in the business community of what it could do to our state and our economy, especially during a time during COVID when things are very tough and tight. Moving on to Amendment 3, this is argued as the open primary ballot, but it's a jumbled primary or guerrilla primary or whatever you want to call it. What it would do is instead of having it would put everyone on the ballot at the same time for state offices such as governor. So for instance, right now, if it was the governor's race of 2018, at the primary election, you could vote for Adam Putnam, Ron DeSantis, Gwen Graham, Andrew Gillum, Bill Levine, Chris, you name it, all of it. Only the top 2 would move to the general. So it's not really a open primary. It's more of a jumbled one that puts everyone together. We've seen in recent days groups come out against it, like the League of Women Voters, the Black Caucus, that have concerns on minority issues as far as the ability to elect a minority candidate moving forward. So that's what Amendment 3 does. Amendment 4 is voter approval of constitutional amendments. What this would do is, back to Amendment 3, this is one that Florida Chamber has opposed from day one. It's one we vehemently oppose, and we're running a campaign now. Contact me if anyone's interested in this effort, but it's one that we see being extremely damaging to Florida's economy, and it can cost potentially hundreds of thousands of jobs. Moving to Amendment 4 is voter approval of constitutional amendments. It is an amendment that would make it tougher to essentially protecting our Constitution. The U.S. Constitution has been amended 27 times since its inception in 1789, whereas Florida's Constitution has been amended over 140 times since 1967. So it's truly, our Constitution is seen as just a pathway to putting, for goodness sake, we have an amendment in our Constitution that protects pregnant pigs. So this would cause any amendment that is passed by Florida voters to pass in multiple elections. So if one passed in 2020, it would also have to pass in 2022 before it became law. So that's what Amendment 4 does. This is one we support because it does clean up the amendmentary process. Amendment 5 is one put on by the legislature, which essentially just moves, it extends the Save Our Homes benefit of reportability when you save your home from a 2-year period to a 3-year period. And finally, Amendment 6 is it's a property tax discount for certain veterans with permanent combat disabilities, and it would carry over to their surviving spouse. So if the spouse passes away, the surviving spouse is not. It still bequeaths the benefit from their loved one being wounded during combat during a war. Those are the 6 amendments. Just sort of a quick look at them. Right now, if you look at the polling on them, the top 4 we pass are at least the threshold to pass. But that's just a quick look. Nick or Jim, I'd be willing to take any questions from anyone if they have any questions on the amendments.
Thanks, Andrew. We're going to keep on moving here. And just want to touch on a few other things. I know we're short on time, but want to just quickly touch on this. I know Jim had asked us to speak on what it looks like going into 2021 and why this election is so important for the business community. And so I just because of COVID and everything that's happening right now, I want to just really touch on one fundamental priority. And it was brought up earlier, Bob, I believe you had brought it up, but liability protections for local businesses. You're seeing this conversation happen at the federal level right now. And this is going to be a conversation that it's not happening at the state level, but since the legislature is not in session right now, you're not seeing it like you're seeing the Senate talking about the next COVID relief package, and the House talking about COVID relief package, the White House talking about it. And the White House and the Senate saying at the top of their priority list is litigation protections for business. And that is something that we hope the federal government is able to accomplish in this next COVID package. But it's also something that is going to need to be addressed at the state level. So that would be at the top of our list moving into the legislative session next year in terms of COVID relief. And then just to wrap up, again, Andrew Wiggins is on our political team here. Anything regarding constitutional amendments, here's his contact information. Again, my contact information, you can reach out to both of us, one of us. Either way, we'll be happy to help answer any questions that you may have after this, or anything that you may need in terms of the upcoming general election, and then even after that. But just a few things in our 2020 Election Center that I want to touch on. So if you visit flchamber.com, if you go to the political portion of the website, we have the 2020 Election Center, and there you'll find the general election voter guide. It's a great document. It's nonpartisan. It doesn't dive into the issues. It simply is an overview of the candidates running for office, from president all the way through the state legislature. And then the amendments as well are listed in there. And it shows the chamber, Florida Chamber endorsed candidates are noted in there, but it shows everybody that's running in the seats, for the seats as well. You'll also in the Election Center find the early voting dashboard. That is a place that you can go for folks out there that are interested in just tracking voting. You can break it down anywhere from state level to county level to state house, state senate seat. You can see voter turnout in those areas. Right now it's live, but you're not going to see anything there because voting hasn't started yet for the general election. But as soon as voting starts, that is updated daily, so you can go there and see what's going on. Again, you'll also be able to see our Florida Chamber endorsements and read more about the constitutional amendments that are on the ballot this year. And finally, questions, but I'll turn it back over to let you moderate that portion.
All right, thanks, Nick. Really appreciate it. That's great information, and I would highly recommend to our participants today to check out that information on the Florida Chamber site. It is very helpful, and we provide as much as we can here locally, but these state issues, particularly as it pertains to amendments, is critically important, and Nick and the team do a great job of kind of breaking that down, and so we really appreciate it. Good stuff. All right, now, before we close out, I do want to recommend that you check into the Chamber Hobnob. Yes, we are having the Chamber Hobnob this year. It will be a little different, of course, like everything else. It will be virtual, and put it on your calendar for October 14th from 5 to 7, and we'll be using that online platform. And so Jim will has plenty of information, but check on the Chamber site. And again, highly recommend it. We have a lot of issues here in Volusia County. And if I have any political statement to make, it is that I am an unabashed, proud capitalist. And so we need to support free enterprise, support commerce, support our businesses in this community, and make sure when you're going down the ballot that you pick for those that support all of our members and what we're trying to do as a chamber here in Volusia County. So I'm going to turn it over to the, this is a comment actually more than a question, but I think it's nice to throw it out here. And this is from Terry Kane Tyler. And she says, having been a poll worker for 5 years, I am confident in the checks and balances in the election process. Each worker, regardless of their experience, attends training prior to each election. Thank you, Lisa. So Lisa Lewis, big shout out from Terry. And, we absolutely second that. It's a great thing that you're doing in preparing for this election. So we have another question. So this is really to you, Lisa, and it says, so with vote by mail ballots going out September 24th, candidates can expect votes to start coming in late September?
Depending on when a voter may receive their ballot, and if they want to go ahead and drop it back to us, yes. But the canvassing board meets October 5th for the first time, so we cannot begin opening and tabulating until the canvassing board meets, tests the equipment, and then approves what we have in-house, and we will begin then, yes. But no results are released until election night after the polls close.
Great. So we don't have any more in the chats, and we've gone a little bit over time. And so what I'm going to do is politely waive. I know that our esteemed president and CEO, Nancy Kiefer, has said she will not, she will waive her comments, but I have to give a big shout out to her. She does a fantastic job, and our team and Jim, everyone else involved from the chamber staff, we appreciate what you do. And what a great program. Again, to our guests, keep on slugging. You know what, we have about 54, 53 days left. So hang in there, folks. It's going to be a wild ride, but I am confident it's going to be nothing like 2000, and we'll come through this just fine. So Lisa, again, good luck, and thanks to everyone, and we'll call it a day.
Thank you. Have a great day.